They called me the cleaning lady for 6 months at my own son's company. I let them, because the day I finally spoke up, I wanted every single person in that boardroom to remember exactly how they'd treated the quiet black woman who emptied their trash cans. My name is Yvonne Washington. I am 68 years old. And on a Tuesday morning last spring, I stood in the glass elevator of Sterling Tower in downtown Atlanta, wearing a gray janitor's uniform and pushing a cleaning cart with a squeaky wheel I'd never bothered to fix, because that squeak told people I was coming, and people who hear a cleaning cart coming stop talking about anything important, which was exactly what I needed them to do. The elevator doors opened on the 34th floor, and my daughter-in-law Brittany walked in. She didn't recognize me. I'd sat across from her at Thanksgiving dinner 4 months earlier. I'd held her newborn niece at a christening 2 years before that. We'd hugged, the way Southern women hug, with our cheeks touching but our hearts turned sideways, at least 3 times in the last decade. She didn't recognize me. She was on her phone, her Birkin bag slung over one shoulder, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. And she was complaining, loudly. "Mother Washington? Oh my God, don't even get me started. Darius wants to put her in assisted living, but she keeps refusing. She just sits in that dusty old house in East Atlanta, knitting scarves and watching game shows. Honestly, Kim, at her age, what does she even contribute anymore? She's a burden. A sweet, quiet burden, but still." I stood 2 feet behind her, holding a spray bottle of glass cleaner, listening to my only son's wife describe me like a piece of furniture nobody wanted to move. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I reached past her and pressed the button for the 47th floor, the executive penthouse, the board of directors floor, the floor no cleaning staff had access to unless they were personally cleared by the CEO. Brittany glanced down at my hand. She laughed, that bright little tinkling laugh rich women use when they're being condescending. "Oh, sweetie, wrong button. That floor is executives only. You probably want 37 for housekeeping supplies." I turned my head slowly and looked her right in the eye. And in the softest Georgia drawl my mama taught me to use when I wanted to end a conversation politely, I said, "Oh, honey, I know exactly which floor I need." She blinked, confused, then shrugged and went back to her phone. The elevator kept climbing. What Brittany didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the name on the deed to Sterling Tower wasn't Sterling. It was Washington. And I'd been quietly watching them run my company into the ground for exactly 247 days. 247 days of mopping marble floors. 247 days of emptying trash cans full of shredded documents I'd later piece back together at my kitchen table. 247 days of being invisible inside a building I had bought with my own 2 hands in 2003. And in 48 hours, on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, I was going to walk into that boardroom one last time. But I wasn't going to be wearing gray. Before I tell you who I really am, you need to understand who they thought I was, because that's the whole story, right there. Not what I did, what they didn't see. Sunday dinner at my son Darius's house was a production. He and Brittany lived in a 6-bedroom showpiece in Buckhead, the kind of neighborhood where the lawns look painted on and the mailboxes cost more than my first car. Darius is 45 years old. He has his father's broad shoulders and my mother's stubborn jawline. He runs, or thinks he runs, Sterling Holdings as chief financial officer. He has an MBA from Emory, a Rolex he doesn't need, and the kind of confidence a man develops when he's never once in his life had to ask himself whether he belonged in the room. He got that confidence from me. I gave it to him. Freely. Without conditions. And I have spent the last 5 years watching him weaponize it against the very woman who built him. That particular Sunday, back in February, I drove my 2015 Toyota Camry the 41 minutes from my little brick house on 2nd Avenue to his mansion. I pulled up behind his Range Rover and Brittany's Porsche Cayenne and sat for a moment in the driveway, looking at the 3-car garage where I knew there was also a vintage Mercedes he bought at auction 2 years ago for $84,000. $84,000 for a car he drives twice a year. I walked up the stone path in my flat shoes and my church dress, the navy blue one with the little white collar, carrying a Tupperware of peach cobbler I'd made from scratch. Brittany answered the door, kissed the air 6 inches from my cheek, and handed the cobbler to the housekeeper without looking at it. Come in, Mother Washington. Dinner's almost ready. Darius is in his study taking a work call. My daughter Tasha was already there with her husband Tyrone and their 2 teenagers. Tasha is 42, a former elementary school teacher who quit 3 years ago to focus on the family, which is what women in our community say when their husbands make too much money and not enough time. Tyrone is an orthopedic surgeon at Emory. Good-looking man. Charming. The kind of charming that always made the hair on my arms stand up just a little, though I never could say why. The kids hugged me. Little Jalen, who's 12, and my Madison, 16 years old, and the only person in that house who hugged me like she actually meant it. Madison has her grandfather Robert's eyes, honey brown, too observant for her own good, and she hugged me extra long that day, pressing her forehead into my shoulder like she was checking to make sure I was still real. We sat down at the dining table, 8 place settings, crystal glasses, the whole production, and for the next 90 minutes I watched my own children talk about me like I wasn't there. Mom forgot her reading glasses on the porch again last week, Darius said, cutting into his filet mignon. Housekeeper found them covered in morning dew. That's the 3rd time this month, Tasha added, sipping her wine. Mama, we really need to talk about the stairs in your house. Tyrone says falls are the #1 cause of hospitalization for women your age. Tyrone nodded sagely, as if he'd personally reviewed the medical literature. It's true, Mother Washington. At 68, a hip fracture could be life-altering. I was 67 at the time, but I didn't correct him. I asked her 3 times last week what my job title is, Darius continued, like I was a curious case study rather than his mother. 3 times. She kept saying, "You work at that company downtown, don't you, baby?" They all laughed, gently, sympathetically, the laugh of adult children humoring a sweet, fading old woman. I smiled and cut my chicken into small pieces. What I was actually thinking was this. I asked you 3 times, Darius Robert Washington, because I wanted to know if you still remembered your real title, or if you only remember the one on your paycheck. And every time you answered, you gave me the same rehearsed line. I'm the CFO of a diversified holdings company, without ever once telling me what the company actually does, because you don't know what it does. You know what your slice of it does. And baby, that's how I knew it was time. But I didn't say any of that. I said, well, I'm just glad you all are doing well. That's all a mama wants. Brittany reached across the table and patted my hand. You're so sweet, Mother Washington. You know we're always going to take care of you. I squeezed her hand back. I know you are, honey. I know. The next morning, I went to Miss Clara's hair salon on Bankhead Highway. I've been going to Miss Clara for 40 years, since before she owned the place, back when she was just a chair renter at Thelma's on Simpson Road. Miss Clara is 65, built like a fire hydrant, has buried 2 husbands, and knows more about me than any living person except my attorney. She was waiting for me with a hot towel and a cup of coffee strong enough to strip paint. You look tired, baby, she said, settling me under the dryer. I've been reading financial statements until 2 in the morning, Clara. And what do those statements say? I pulled a folded page out of my purse. A page I'd photographed off Darius's desk at Sterling Tower 2 nights earlier while I was cleaning his office. They say my son is stealing from me, Clara. Slow, smart, through 3 different shell companies. But stealing. Miss Clara didn't gasp. She didn't clutch her pearls. She just kept oiling my scalp with her strong brown fingers and said quietly, How much? 4.2 million so far. He's being patient about it. He thinks he has time. And what are you going to do, Yvonne? I looked at her in the mirror. At this woman who had held my hand at Robert's funeral, who had fed my children when I worked double shifts the year Robert died, who knew, because I'd told her 20 years ago, exactly what I really owned and exactly why I'd chosen to keep it hidden. I'm going to let him dig 1 more foot, Clara, and then I'm going to pull the ladder up. She laughed. That low, rolling laugh that's kept black women alive in this country for 400 years. Baby, you was always the patient one. Robert would have walked in there with a shotgun. Robert walked this earth for 48 years and never needed a shotgun a day in his life. He used his head. I'm going to use mine. Here is what the world saw when it looked at me. A sweet church lady. A retired 3rd-grade teacher who taught at W.D. Thompson Elementary in East Atlanta for 22 years. A widow who still wore her late husband's wedding band on a chain around her neck. A grandmother who knitted scarves and baked peach cobblers and drove a 12-year-old Toyota. A woman who was fading. A woman who forgot things. A woman who could be managed, placed, moved, and eventually inherited from. A burden. Here is what no one saw. That I was the single largest private owner of commercial real estate between Birmingham and Jacksonville. that my morning routine included reading the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and 3 separate industry briefings before my son came up. That the dusty old house Brittany mocked had a study in the back, behind a door my children assumed led to a sewing room, where I managed a portfolio worth nearly $500 million. That I had cleaned toilets in my own building for 8 months, not because I had to, but because I wanted to know, really know, what kind of man my son became when he thought nobody who mattered was watching. And I'd found out. About 6 weeks before that Sunday dinner, I had finally applied for the night shift janitorial position at Sterling Tower. I used my maiden name, Vivian Jackson, and a fake work history from a cleaning company in Mobile. I wore drugstore readers and a cheap gray wig over my own silver hair. I let Patricia, the day shift supervisor, a white woman in her 50s who called everyone Hun, regardless of whether she liked them, treat me like I was slow. Vivian Hun, you missed a spot in conference room B. Vivian Hun, the mop goes on the cart, not the floor. Vivian Hun, do you understand what I'm saying? Nod if you understand. I understood, Patricia. I understood every word. I understood when the young executives walked past me in the hall without breaking stride in their conversations. I understood when Brittany once handed me her empty Starbucks cup in the lobby and said, "Thanks, sweetie," without ever looking up from her phone. I understood when my own son passed me in the 47th floor corridor on a Wednesday evening in October, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Tom Ford, the one I'd given him for Christmas 3 years earlier, and he did not turn his head. Not once. In 247 days. My son walked past his own mother 89 times. I counted. And every single time I felt something inside me harden into a shape I recognized from 30 years ago. A shape I hadn't needed to wear since Robert died. The shape of a woman who has decided, finally and completely, that she is done pretending. But I didn't act. Not yet. Because a woman who's built what I've built doesn't react. She prepares. My friends at the church suspected something. Sister Eloise, who's been sitting in the pew behind me at Ebenezer Baptist for 26 years, cornered me after service one Sunday in March. "Yvonne, baby, what's going on with you? You got that look." "What look, Eloise?" "The look my grandmama used to get before she laid somebody out. You quiet. Too quiet. Something brewing." I patted her hand and smiled. "Eloise, honey, I'm fine, just tired. You know how it is." She looked at me for a long moment. Well, whatever it is, I'll be praying for them." "For me?" "No, baby. For them." And that's the thing about being a black woman of a certain age in the American South. The people who really see you, the ones who grew up the way you grew up, who buried the same kind of husbands, who raised the same kind of children, they don't need you to explain yourself. They can read you like scripture. My children had forgotten how to read me, but Sister Eloise still remembered. To understand what I'm about to tell you, you need to know who I was before anyone in that family was even born. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, born in 1957, the second of 4 children. My daddy, James Monroe Jackson, was a plumber who could fix any pipe, any leak, any problem in any house he was allowed to enter, which in the Savannah of the 1960s wasn't all of them. My mama, Gloria Mae Jackson, taught 4th grade at a segregated school until integration forced her into a district that paid her less and respected her less and worked her twice as hard. Mama had a saying. She'd whisper it to me every morning when she braided my hair before school. "Yvonne, baby, they can't take what they can't see. You keep your head up, your eyes open, and your business your own." I was the first woman in my family to go to college. Spelman, class of 1979. Double major. Business administration and real estate. Nobody in my family understood why. My daddy asked me, "Baby girl, what's a colored girl going to do with a business degree?" My mama just said, "She's going to do whatever she needs to do, James. You hush." I met Robert Washington during my junior year. He was at Morehouse, studying electrical engineering. He walked up to me outside the library one October afternoon, held out a crumpled piece of notebook paper and said, "I wrote this poem about a girl I've never had the courage to talk to. Would you read it and tell me if it's any good?" The poem was about me. He'd been watching me for 6 months. I married him 11 months later. Robert was not a loud man. He wasn't flashy. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't run the streets. He woke up at 5 in the morning every day of our marriage and read for 1 hour before he went to work. He saved every paycheck from his job at Georgia Power, and by the time we'd been married 3 years, we had $24,000 in a savings account at Citizens Trust Bank. the black-owned bank where my daddy had opened an account for me when I was 7 years old. In 1982, we bought our first house. Not to live in, to rent. A little 2-bedroom on Joyland Street that the bank had foreclosed on. We paid $11,000. The mortgage on our actual home, my house on 2nd Avenue, the one my children now call Dusty, was still $7,300. That first rental property cash flowed $140 a month. By 1985, we had 4 rental properties. By 1990, 12. By 1995, 47. 47 houses, most of them in neighborhoods that white investors wouldn't touch. Bought cheap, fixed by Robert on weekends with his own hands. Rented to black families who had been denied mortgages by every bank in Atlanta because of redlining that wasn't supposed to exist anymore, but still absolutely did. We didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Robert's parents, not the children. Robert used to say, "Yvonne, a man who brags about his money in church is a man who's about to lose it in the parking lot." I'd tease him. "Robert Washington, when was the last time you heard somebody robbed in a church parking lot?" And he'd say, "Baby, I'm speaking metaphorically, mostly." In 1998, Robert was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He died 4 months later. He was 48 years old. Darius was 15. Tasha was 12. I was 41, a widow with 2 grieving children, 47 rental properties, commercial holdings I just started building, and a choice to make. I could tell my children what their father and I had built. I could raise them as rich kids with trust funds and expectations and the soft hands that come from never having to wonder whether the check will clear. Or I could keep my promise to Robert. Because Robert and I had made a promise to each other, back in 1991, sitting on the porch of our second rental property on a July evening with sweet tea in our hands. We had watched the Carter family across the street. 3 generations. A grandfather who'd started with nothing and built up a chain of dry cleaners, sons who drove BMWs and hadn't held a real job between them, grandchildren who couldn't count change. And Robert had turned to me and said, "Yvonne, if we ever build anything real, promise me our children won't know. Not until they've had to build something of their own first." I promised him, so I kept my promise. I put everything into a revocable trust, the Washington Family Trust, with my old college friend Reginald Brooks as trustee. Reggie was a tax attorney at a respected firm in Atlanta, and he'd been Robert's closest friend since Morehouse. Every property we owned went into LLCs with names nobody would connect to me. Magnolia Holdings, Peachtree Commercial Group, Sterling Development Partners, a dozen others. And I took a job. I went to work as a 3rd-grade teacher at W.D. Thompson Elementary, earning $38,000 a year, and I raised my children on a teacher's salary. We lived in the same little brick house on 2nd Avenue. We shopped at Kroger. We clipped coupons. I drove a 1994 Buick Century until 2014. Darius and Tasha grew up thinking we were solidly lower middle class. They got scholarships for college. Darius to Morehouse, Tasha to Clark Atlanta. They believed they'd earned those scholarships. And they had, academically. What they didn't know was that the Jackson Washington Educational Foundation that paid for their books, housing, and living expenses was mine, funded entirely by me, administered through Reggie's office so there would be no paper trail. I watched them grow up believing they had pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps. And for a while it worked. Darius got his MBA. Tasha got her teaching credential. They both married, had children, started their careers. And then, around 2015, something started to shift. Darius landed a job at a mid-sized real estate firm downtown. The firm was called Sterling Holdings. It was mine. He didn't know that. I'd bought it in 2003 and kept it operational under my ownership, but managed by outside executives. When Darius interviewed for a junior analyst position there in 2015, the hiring manager called me at home. Reggie had quietly instructed the firm to run all senior hires past me and asked if I was aware that my son had applied. I said, hire him on merit. If he's not qualified, don't hire him. If he is, treat him like any other employee. They hired him. He was qualified. He worked hard for the first 5 years. He earned promotions. He made mistakes and recovered from them. And I watched from a distance, through quarterly reports and the occasional dinner where I'd ask innocent-seeming questions about his work. And somewhere around 2021, something changed in him. He stopped talking about projects. He started talking about positioning. He bought the house in Buckhead, over-leveraged, I could see from the mortgage records Reggie pulled for me, and married Brittany, who came from what she called old Atlanta money, but which was really new money wearing old clothes. He started wearing watches I knew he couldn't afford on his salary. He started missing Sunday dinners. And then, last August, the board promoted him to Chief Financial Officer. I did not make that promotion happen. The board made it on merit. But I knew, the moment Reggie called me to tell me it had happened, that I was going to have to watch him very carefully, because I had seen what happened to other men when they got handed a big title without anyone watching. And I had made myself a promise, decades ago, that I would never hand my company to anyone who did not deserve it, not even my son. So 1 week after Darius became CFO of Sterling Holdings, Yvonne Washington, age 67, applied for the night shift janitorial position under the name Vivian Jackson. And I have been watching, listening, and learning ever since. By the time I reached 240 days, I knew almost everything. I knew Darius had started routing contracts through a shell company called Hollis Consulting LLC. I knew he was skimming consulting fees that went nowhere, or rather that went into an account he controlled jointly with his attorney, Gregory Hollis. I knew the total was somewhere north of $4 million and growing. What I did not know, what I could not know until it happened, was how far he was actually willing to go. And on the night of my 247th day as Vivian Jackson, cleaning lady of Sterling Tower, I found out. It was a Thursday evening, 10:47 p.m. The executive floor was officially empty. I was pushing my cart down the long marble corridor toward the main conference room, and my squeaky wheel, which I had never fixed because it was useful, was squeaking like it always did. Which is why the voices coming from Darius's office didn't stop when I approached. They thought I was just the cleaning lady. They thought nobody who mattered was listening. And that, children, is where everything changed. The door to Darius's office was cracked open about 4 inches, enough for the voices to carry, enough for me to see, if I angled my cart just right, the reflection of 3 men in the glass of the window overlooking downtown Atlanta. My son, sitting behind his desk, leaned back in that $9,000 executive chair he'd requisitioned 6 weeks into his CFO role. Gregory Hollis, his attorney, standing by the window with a drink in his hand. And a third man I'd seen before but couldn't immediately place. Tall, thin, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of gray suit accountants wear when they want to blend into filing cabinets. Martin Klein, that was his name. I remembered because I'd seen it on a payroll document 2 weeks earlier. Martin Klein, listed as an outside tax consultant, paid $42,000 a month for services the company had no record of receiving. I parked my cart against the wall. I picked up my bottle of glass cleaner and a rag, and I started wiping down a window 12 feet from Darius's door. Slowly, methodically, the way a woman who's been cleaning for 6 months and has nowhere better to be might wipe down a window on a Thursday night. The old trustee, Brooks, is 71. That was Darius's voice, casual, untroubled, like he was talking about replacing a refrigerator. He's slowing down. I've talked to my contact at probate court. Judge Patterson's out. She's a Washington loyalist, been friends with my mother for 30 years. But Judge Martinez is newer, and he owes Hollis a favor from the Briarcliff matter. And the basis for the petition? Gregory Hollis, cool and professional. Diminished capacity, early-stage dementia. I've got 2 years of anecdotal evidence, forgotten appointments, repeated questions, confusion about basic family details. My wife and sister will both sign affidavits. Tasha's on board. She needs money for Tyrone's situation. What situation? Malpractice thing. Settlement's going to cost her around $400,000. She can't ask him to pay it, it's his mess, and she doesn't have the money herself. So she's motivated. My hand, holding their rag, had stopped moving on the glass. Tasha, my baby girl, the one who used to fall asleep in my lap during Wednesday night choir rehearsal, the one I'd taught to braid hair and balance a checkbook and tell a good man from a sweet-talking one. My Tasha was going to sign an affidavit saying her mother had dementia. I kept wiping, slower now, making sure the squeak of the rag on the glass sounded exactly the same as it had a minute earlier. Martin Klein spoke up. And once you have guardianship? Forced sale of Sterling Tower to a buyer we control. We've got a shell ready, a Delaware LLC, clean records, untraceable to any of us. Buyer offers 40% under market, citing a distressed seller situation. My mother's legally incompetent, so Hollis signs off as temporary conservator. Deal closes in 60 days. 6 months later, that same shell sells the tower to a REIT at market. We split the spread 3 ways. How much spread? Conservative estimate? 130 million. My cut's 52. Yours is 39, Martin. Gregory, you're at 39. There was a pause. I could picture the 3 of them, my son, the attorney, the accountant, looking at each other across a desk I had paid for, in an office in a building I owned, calmly dividing up $130 million of my life's work. Then Gregory Hollis asked the question that will stay with me until the day I die. You sure she doesn't suspect, even a little? And my son, Darius Robert Washington, the boy I carried inside my body for 39 weeks, the boy I nursed at my own breast, the boy whose forehead I kissed every night for 18 years. My son laughed. He laughed. My mother? Are you kidding? She thinks I work at a company downtown. She's never even set foot in this building. You know what she's doing right now, Gregory? She's sitting in her little house watching Wheel of Fortune and knitting a scarf for my daughter's birthday. That's my mother. Sweet, dim, and about to be declared legally incompetent by the state of Georgia. Martin Klein chuckled. Gregory Hollis took a long sip of his drink. I finished wiping the window. I picked up my spray bottle. I pushed my squeaky cart with my squeaky wheel all the way down the corridor, into the service elevator, down to the parking garage, and out to my 12-year-old Toyota Camry. I got in. I closed the door. I sat there with both hands on the steering wheel. And for 90 seconds, exactly 90 seconds, I watched the dashboard clock. I let myself cry. I cried for the boy who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. I cried for the man he should have become and didn't. I cried for Robert, who wasn't alive to see what his son had turned into, and who I was fiercely glad wasn't alive to see it. I cried for myself, for the woman I had been when I was pregnant with Darius, and dreaming about the kind of father Robert would be to him, the kind of mother I would be to him, the kind of life we were going to build together. And then I stopped. I opened my purse. I pulled out the lipstick I'd stopped wearing 8 months ago, a deep berry color I'd worn on my wedding day, and I put it on in the rearview mirror, slowly and carefully, the way my mama taught me. Then I picked up my phone and called Reggie. It was 11:15 p.m. He answered on the second ring. Yvonne. Reggie, it's time. There was a pause. I heard him sit up. I heard him set down whatever he'd been drinking. I heard the sound of a lawyer who'd been waiting for this call for 8 months, finally exhaling. Tell me. I need you to call Judge Patterson tonight. Tell her what's happening. I need the forensic accountants at Sterling Tower by 6 a.m. Monday. I need every senior executive, every board member, every attorney on retainer, and my son in the main conference room at 9 a.m. sharp. I want Martin Klein and Gregory Hollis in that room too. Have Andre pick them up personally. Use the provision in the bylaws about mandatory attendance for ownership transitions. Yvonne, are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back for him. I can't protect him from the federal charges. The guardianship fraud alone is... Reggie, my son just told a stranger in an office I paid for that I watch Wheel of Fortune. Baby, I haven't watched that show since 1994. If my own child doesn't know what I do on a Thursday night, what else doesn't he know about me? And what else is he willing to do to a woman he believes he already understands? Reggie was quiet for a long moment. I'll make the calls. 9 a.m. Monday. Reggie, one more thing. Yes? I want Miss Clara at the salon at 6 a.m. Monday. I want the charcoal suit pressed and delivered to my house Sunday evening. I want Andre in the Escalade at 8 o'clock. And I want the pearls. Your mother's pearls? Yes. Yvonne, you haven't worn those in public since Robert's funeral. I know, Reggie. I know. I hung up. I started my car. I drove the 41 minutes home to 2nd Avenue. I parked in my driveway, walked up my own front steps, unlocked my own front door, and stood in the hallway of the house where I had raised both of my children and buried my husband and built an empire nobody knew about. And then I went to the small cedar chest in my bedroom closet, the one Robert had built for me in 1983, our first Christmas as a married couple. And I took out the things I had not touched in 28 years. The pearls, my mother's Mikimoto strand, given to her by my daddy on their 25th anniversary. The ring, the thin copper band Robert had twisted out of electrical wire the night before our wedding, because we couldn't afford a real ring yet. The photograph. Me and Robert, 1980, standing outside our first rental property on Joyland Street, his arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning like we'd just gotten away with something, which in a way we had. I laid all three on my dresser. I looked at myself in the mirror. 68 years old. Silver hair still pulled back in the same simple bun I'd worn since 1975. The lines on my face carved by grief and laughter, and 40 years of reading fine print in bad light. I said out loud to the woman in the mirror and to the man in the photograph, "Robert, I kept my promise as long as I could. I'm sorry, baby. It's time." The next morning was Friday. I had 2 days to prepare. I spent Friday with Reggie and a team of 7 attorneys in a conference room at his firm, not Sterling Tower. We used his offices so nobody at Sterling would see the activity. We walked through every document. The forensic audit of the past 18 months. The bank records showing Hollis Consulting LLC receiving $4,217,000 in consulting fees that corresponded to no actual consulting work. The wire transfers. The falsified invoices Darius had signed. The power of attorney document he had forged, with my signature traced from a birthday card, to authorize the creation of the shell buyer entity. That last one was a federal crime, not a civil matter. A federal crime with a federal sentencing guideline of up to 20 years. Reggie looked up from the document at one point and said gently, "Yvonne, you understand that if we present all of this on Monday, we are handing your son to federal prosecutors. You will not be able to take it back." I looked at him across the table, at this man who had loved my husband like a brother, who had held Darius at his christening, who had walked Tasha down the aisle at her wedding when Robert couldn't. "Reggie, do you remember what you said to me the day Robert died?" "I remember." "Tell me." He looked down at his hands. I said, "Yvonne, you have 2 choices now. You can be the woman who lost her husband, or you can be the woman who kept her promises to him. You can't be both." "And what did I choose?" "You chose the promises." "I'm still choosing them, Reggie. Robert and I promised each other that we would not hand this to a child who hadn't earned it. Darius didn't just fail to earn it. He tried to steal it. From his own mother. He was going to have me declared insane, Reggie. He was going to put me in a facility and take my name off my own deeds. He was going to do that to his own mother." "I know, Yvonne. So no, I'm not handing him to federal prosecutors. Not on Monday. I'm going to give him a choice first. But I'm going to have every single piece of evidence in that room, and he is going to see all of it, and he is going to know that his mother could have ended his entire life in 30 seconds, and she chose not to. And baby, whether he becomes a man who can hold that knowledge or a man who cannot, that's up to him." Reggie nodded slowly. "All right, Yvonne, all right." On Saturday afternoon, I drove over to see Tasha. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up. My daughter opened the door, surprised to see me, holding a glass of white wine in one hand and wearing the kind of loungewear that costs $400 and looks like pajamas. "Mama, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Baby, can I come in? I just wanted to see you." Of course, come in. Tyrone's upstairs. Madison's at a friend's house. Jalen's at practice." She led me into her kitchen, poured me a glass of sweet tea, sat down across from me. And I watched her. Really watched her, the way I hadn't let myself watch her in months, and I saw what Darius had missed and what I had almost missed. My daughter was exhausted. Not tired. Exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that settles behind the eyes and doesn't leave even when a person laughs. "Tasha, baby, how are you really?" She tried to smile. "I'm fine, Mama." "Tasha Marie Washington, do not lie to your mama." The smile cracked. She looked down at her wine glass. "It's just been a hard year, Mama. That's all." "Hard how?" She didn't answer for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "Tyrone and I are working through some things." "What kind of things?" She looked up, and I saw my 12-year-old daughter in her face. The little girl who used to come to me when the other children at school said something mean. The little girl who wanted her mama to make it better. "Mama, please don't ask me about this tonight." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Tasha, I already know." She froze. "I know about the nurse, baby. I know about the baby she's carrying. I know about the $400,000 you think you need." "Mama, how do you—" "That's not important. What's important is that I know, and I need you to listen to me very carefully right now, because what happens between you and me in the next 72 hours is going to shape the rest of your life. Do you understand me?" She was crying now. Not loud, just tears running down her face while she held my hand. "Mama, I'm so sorry. I was going to—" Darius said if I signed the papers, I'd get $400,000 from the estate transition, and I could pay the girl off, and Tyrone and I could start over, and Tasha. And I told myself it was just paperwork, Mama, just a formality, because you are forgetting things. I've seen it. And Darius said it would be fine, and I'm so tired, Mama. I'm so tired of all of this. Tasha, stop. She stopped. She looked at me. Her face was wet and open and 5 years old. Baby girl, listen to me. I am not forgetting anything. I am not sick. I am not confused. Your brother is a liar, and he has been lying to you, and he has been lying to himself, and on Monday morning I'm going to stop him. But I need you to do one thing for me between now and then. Anything, Mama. I need you to not call him. I need you to not warn him. I need you to show up at Sterling Tower at 9 a.m. on Monday in your good suit, and I need you to sit in the chair I tell you to sit in, and I need you to listen. Can you do that for me? Mama, Tasha, can you do that? Yes, Mama. Yes. I squeezed her hand. Baby, I'm going to tell you something now, and I want you to hear me. You are not your brother. You made a bad choice, but you made it out of fear, not out of greed. And fear is something a mother can work with. Greed is harder. Do you understand the difference? Yes, Mama. Good. Now go upstairs and tell Tyrone his wife is going to need some space this weekend. And then come back down here and sit with your Mama, because I have not seen you enough this year. And I miss you. She went upstairs. She came back down. We sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours, and we talked about things we had not talked about in a decade. I told her about her father, about the promises we had made, about the woman I really was. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough for her to understand that on Monday morning, her whole world was going to shift on its axis, and that she was going to be okay, if she was brave. Monday morning, April 21st, 2026. One day, 2 worlds, 6 a.m. Miss Clara arrived at my house on 2nd Avenue at the exact moment my coffee maker finished brewing. She came in through the kitchen door, set down a black leather bag the size of a carry-on suitcase, and looked me up and down. Lord have mercy, Yvonne. You ready? Clara, I've been ready since 1998. Sit down, baby. Let's get you right. She sat me at my kitchen table in front of a mirror she'd brought with her. She opened the bag. Out came combs, pins, oils, a pressing comb she'd inherited from her own grandmother, and a small velvet pouch I hadn't seen in 28 years. Clara, what's that? Your mother's hairpins, baby, the silver ones. You gave them to me to hold after the funeral. Said you couldn't look at them yet. Well, it's been 28 years, Yvonne. I think today's the day. I started to cry. Just a little. Just enough. Clara. Hush, baby. You can cry, but don't mess up my styling surface. She worked on my hair for an hour and a half. She did not dye it. She did not straighten it. She combed out my natural silver afro, shaped it with her hands, finished it with a light oil that smelled like my mother's kitchen, and pinned the silver pins, my mama's silver pins, on either side. When she was done, she turned me toward the mirror. The woman looking back at me was my mother, Gloria Mae Jackson, who had died in 1989 without ever knowing her daughter would own half of downtown Atlanta. Mama, I whispered. She's with you today, baby, Miss Clara said. She's been with you the whole time. 7:30 a.m., across town in Buckhead, Darius Washington was in his home gym, finishing a set of bench presses. Brittany appeared at the top of the stairs in a silk robe, holding a cappuccino. Big day today, babe? Board meeting, quarterly review, routine. Is your mom going to be okay alone this week? Didn't you say you were going to do the assisted living tour? She's fine, Britt. She doesn't even remember me telling her things half the time. By Christmas, it's all handled. Brittany smiled and walked back to their bedroom. 8 a.m. Andre Jackson pulled the black Cadillac Escalade into my driveway at 7:58. He got out, walked around, opened the back door, and stood waiting with his hands folded in front of him, the way he always did. Andre has been my driver for 15 years. He is 61 years old. He retired from the Atlanta Police Department in 2009 after 25 years on the force, and I hired him 2 weeks later. I pay him $95,000 a year, plus health insurance and a retirement contribution. I have only ever asked him to do 2 things: drive me where I need to go and never ask why. This morning, he looked at me as I came down my front steps in the charcoal suit and the pearls and my silver afro, and for the first time in 15 years, Andre Jackson lost his composure. He put his hand over his mouth. His eyes filled. "Mrs. Washington," he said. "Mrs. Washington, you look like what, Andre?" "Like the woman Mr. Washington told me about. The one he said I'd get to meet one day if I waited long enough." I stopped on the bottom step. "Robert talked to you about me?" "The week before he passed, ma'am. He came down to the shop where I was working back then, security for his office building. He said, 'Andre, I'm not going to make it, brother, but my wife is going to need a man who can drive her and keep his mouth shut for the rest of her life. Can you do that?' And I said I could. He said, 'One day, if she ever lets you, you're going to see her how she really is, and it's going to be worth every year you waited.' That was 1998, ma'am." "Andre." "Yes, ma'am?" "You've waited 28 years. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you, Andre." I got in the car. He closed the door, and we drove toward downtown Atlanta together, silently, the way we had driven together for 15 years. 8:15 a.m. Darius's study. His phone rang. It was Tasha. "Did she suspect anything this weekend?" He laughed. "Nothing. She came by your house, right? What'd she do?" "She just sat in the kitchen, talked about old times. She gave me a handmade scarf she knitted." "See? That's my point. She's fading, Tasha. By Christmas, we'll own everything." Tasha was silent for a long moment. "Tasha?" "Okay, I'll see you at 9. Darius put his phone down. He smiled at himself in the mirror. He adjusted his tie. He had no idea his sister had just lied to him for the first time in 42 years. 8:30 a.m. Sterling Tower. The Escalade pulled up to the main entrance. Not the parking garage. Not the service entrance I had used for 8 months. The main entrance. Andre got out, walked around, and opened my door. I stepped out onto the pavement of the building I had purchased in 2003 for $112 million in a transaction structured through 4 separate holding companies so that nobody in Atlanta real estate would ever know a black woman owned the tallest private commercial tower downtown. I walked into my own lobby. Marcus Freeman was working the front desk. He's been working security at this building for 20 years. He knew me as Vivian. He'd nodded at me 8 months' worth of times as I wheeled my cart past him. Today, Marcus looked up. His eyes went to my face. His mouth opened. He started to say something, probably Miss Vivian, and then he stopped, because his brain was processing the suit, and the pearls, and the hair, and the way Andre was standing one step behind me, and the way 2 attorneys in dark suits were crossing the lobby toward us. I walked up to the desk. I set a black keycard down in front of him, without a photograph, with 2 words printed in gold on the front. "Why Washington Principal." Marcus stared at it. He looked up at me. His face did something I will never forget for as long as I live. It went through shock, then recognition, then something like grief, and then, finally, the faintest trace of a smile. "Mrs. Washington," he said quietly. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. You've been kind to me for 8 months, and I deceived you. We'll talk properly after today. For now, I need you to hold the elevators. Nobody goes up to 47 after the last executive arrives until I say otherwise. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Washington." I squeezed his hand across the desk. I walked to the private executive elevator. I stepped inside. The doors closed, and I began my ascent to the 47th floor of my own building, 1 floor at a time, alone, in the silence, rising. 8:45 a.m. 47th floor. Darius stepped off the regular elevator and froze. The executive corridor was full of people. Not the usual handful of assistants. 30 people. Men and women in dark suits, standing in small clusters, speaking in low voices. He recognized Reggie Brooks by the main conference room door. He recognized 2 senior partners from the firm that handled Sterling's outside legal work. He did not recognize the 4 forensic accountants, or the 2 representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission, or the silver-haired woman in a federal judge's standard dark suit, Judge Patterson, retired, serving today as a witness. He did not know his own sister was already sitting inside the conference room, in the 3rd chair on the left, with her hands folded in her lap and tears in her eyes. He walked up to Reggie. "Reggie, what the hell is all this? Who called a meeting?" "Have a seat, Mr. Washington. The principal is on her way up." "The principal? What principal?" "I'm the CFO. I'd know if—" From the executive elevator at the end of the corridor, a single bell chimed. Ding. The doors began to open. and 30 people in that hallway turned their heads, all at once, toward the sound. The elevator doors opened at 9 a.m. exactly, and the woman who stepped out, the woman in the charcoal suit with the silver afro and the pearl necklace and the quiet brown eyes, was a woman my son had never, not once in his 45 years of life, actually looked at. I walked down that corridor the same way I had walked down it 247 times before. Same pace, same posture, same hands. The only difference was that this time, 30 people stepped aside to let me pass, and not one of them was looking at my cleaning cart. Because there was no cart. I walked past Reggie Brooks. He nodded once. I walked past Judge Patterson. She gave me the small, private smile of a woman who has been waiting a long time for a friend to finally become herself. I walked past my son. Darius was standing just outside the conference room door, his mouth slightly open, one hand still holding his coffee cup. His eyes tracked me as I passed him. I saw the exact moment his brain began to process what his eyes were telling him. I saw him look at my face, then at my hair, then at the pearls, then back at my face. I saw the first flicker of a word forming on his lips. Mother? And then I saw it die before it could leave his mouth, because another thought had already overtaken it. It can't be her. It can't be her. Why would she be here? I did not stop. I walked past him and into the conference room. The room was already full. 24 people around the long walnut table, plus standing room for the rest. Tasha was in her seat, third chair on the left, her eyes red, but her back straight. Gregory Hollis was at the far end of the table, loosening his tie. Martin Klein was next to him, a thin film of sweat already visible on his forehead. They had not been told what this meeting was about. They had been told only that their attendance was mandatory under the company bylaws. Andre had personally escorted Martin Klein from his home. 2 of Reggie's associates had brought Gregory Hollis from his office. Neither man had been given the option to decline. At the head of the table there was one chair, the CEO's chair. It had been empty for 6 months, officially because the board was conducting a search for a new chief executive, unofficially because Darius had been positioning himself to slide into it by summer. I walked the length of the table. I did not look at Gregory or Martin. I did not look at Darius, who had followed me into the room and was now standing just inside the doorway, his face beginning to drain of color. I reached the chair. I pulled it out. I sat down. Reggie Brooks walked to the podium at the side of the table, opened a leather folder, and said in the calm, quiet voice of a man who has been a tax attorney in Atlanta for 45 years. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. This is a specially convened meeting of Sterling Holdings pursuant to Article 9, Section 4 of the company bylaws, concerning an ownership transition and the disclosure of material information regarding the principal shareholder. Presiding over this meeting is the principal and sole beneficial owner of Sterling Holdings, Mrs. Yvonne Jackson Washington. The room went absolutely still. Darius's coffee cup slipped from his hand. It didn't shatter, the carpet was too thick, but the coffee spilled across his expensive Italian shoes, and he did not appear to notice. Mother? His voice was high and thin. Mother, what is this? You can't be... I lifted my eyes to him for the first time. Son, sit down. Mother, this is a closed executive meeting. You can't just... Darius Robert Washington, I said sit down. He sat down. In the first chair on the right, directly to my side, the chair he had been sitting in for 8 months. The CFO's chair. The chair that had been mine, once in 2005, when I still sometimes came down here to sign things under my real name before I handed operational control to outside managers, so no one would ever trace the ownership back to me. Reggie slid a thin folder across the table. I opened it. I took out the top document. It was a single sheet of paper, the deed to Sterling Tower, in my name. I set it down on the table in front of me so the whole room could see it. Then I looked at my son, and I began to speak. Darius, my son, named after your grandfather Darius Jackson, who was a sharecropper in Screven County, Georgia, who worked another man's land for 41 years, and never once in his life owned a single square inch of dirt beneath his own feet. And named after your father Robert Washington, who saved every dollar he earned for 13 years, so that one day his children would own everything they walked on. The room was so silent, I could hear the air handler cycling on the floor above us. For 45 years, I let you believe I was a third-grade teacher who got lucky with a small pension. For 8 months, I let you believe you were running this company. and for the past 247 days, I have cleaned this very conference room on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights while you sat in that chair beside me and called me a burden." Somebody at the far end of the table gasped. "I have stood 3 feet from your office door while you planned to have me declared mentally incompetent. I have listened to you explain to 2 men in this room. I did not look at Gregory or Martin, but every head in the room turned toward them. Exactly how you intended to steal this building from me. I have watched you sign forged documents with a signature you traced from a birthday card I sent you last October." Darius was not breathing. "Son, I am the burden. I own this building. I own your car. The lease is through a Sterling subsidiary. I own the mortgage on your house. I own the trust that pays for Madison's private school. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, according to the forensic audit Mr. Brooks completed over the weekend, I also own the evidence that you have embezzled $4,217,403 from Sterling Holdings in the past 18 months. Mama," the word came out of him broken. "I am not finished." He stopped. "The forgery of my signature on the power of attorney document creating Apex Acquisitions LLC is a federal crime, Darius. The attempted guardianship fraud, the petition you were planning to file Thursday in Judge Martinez's courtroom, is a separate federal crime. Mr. Hollis's involvement is a third federal crime and grounds for disbarment. Mr. Klein, your work product constitutes conspiracy to commit wire fraud across state lines." Martin Klein made a small choking sound. Gregory Hollis had gone the color of the wall behind him. I turned my full attention back to Darius. "Son, do you know who I am?" Tears were running down his face. He tried to speak. He couldn't. "Answer me, Darius. Do you know who I am?" "Mama, I don't know." "I will tell you who I am. I am the woman you walked past 89 times in this hallway over the past 8 months without ever once looking up from your phone. I am the woman whose name is on every paycheck in this building, including the one you cashed on Friday. I am the woman who held you in this body for 9 months and nursed you at this breast and worked 2 jobs the year your father died so you could have piano lessons. I am your mother, and today is the first day in your entire adult life that you are finally going to see me." He put his head in his hands. He wept, in front of 30 people, in front of his sister, in front of Gregory Hollis and Martin Klein, who had laughed with him in an office 3 nights earlier about how sweet and dim his mother was. I let him weep. I did not hurry him, because 45 years ago, I had held that boy in my arms in a hospital in East Point, Georgia, and I had looked into his face and I had sworn to his father that I would raise him to be a man. And this right here, was the moment I found out whether I had succeeded. I asked the room to clear. 34 people filed out in silence. Reggie stayed. Tasha stayed. Andre stood by the door, arms folded, watching. Gregory Hollis and Martin Klein were escorted out by federal officers who had been waiting in the lobby. Not arrested, not yet, but served with formal notice that they were now subjects of active federal investigation, and that any attempt to leave the state of Georgia would result in immediate detention. Gregory Hollis was weeping by the time he reached the elevator. Martin Klein vomited into a trash can in the corridor. I did not watch them go. When the room was quiet, I turned to my children. My son on one side of the table, my daughter on the other. "Tasha, come sit beside your brother." She got up, walked around the table, and sat down next to him. She did not look at him. He did not look at her. "Both of you, look at me." They looked up. "I am going to say this once, and I am going to say it clearly, because after today, I am not going to be able to say it again without becoming the mother I decided a long time ago not to be. Your father and I built everything I have with our own hands. We did not inherit it. We did not get it handed to us. We earned it in a country that did not want us to have it, through a banking system that did not want to lend to us, in neighborhoods that other investors would not enter. Your father died before he could see what we built become what it became. I have carried that weight alone for 28 years, and I have carried it in part so that the 2 of you would have the chance to become the kind of people who could carry it after me." I paused. I took a drink of water. "One of you tried to steal it. The other one tried to sign papers saying her mother was insane. Both of you have failed me in ways I did not know were possible. And yet I am sitting in this room with both of you right now, because I am your mother, and that is what mothers do until there is nothing left to do." Darius put his face in his hands again. Darius, I am going to give you a choice. You will not get a second one. He looked up. Choice number 1. I hand the evidence Mr. Brooks has collected to the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia this afternoon. You will be arrested by Friday. You will be indicted within 60 days. The federal sentencing guidelines for what you have done taken together begin at 15 years and go up to 25. Brittany will divorce you. Madison will visit you in prison. You will be released in your 60s, a felon with no money, no reputation, and no family except the one that still remembers you. That is choice number 1. Daddy. Mama. Choice number 2. You resign from Sterling Holdings effective immediately. You sign a full confession, which Mr. Brooks will hold in escrow. You repay the $4.2 million over 24 months, which will require you to sell your house in Buckhead, the Range Rover, the Mercedes, the vintage watch collection, and approximately 70% of your current lifestyle. You enroll in a 24-month court-approved program of counseling and restorative accountability with a therapist I will choose. You will have no contact with Brittany for 6 months. She is, in my judgment, the loudest voice in the room that tells you you are better than you are, and you need to learn to hear quieter voices. And you will have no contact with Madison unsupervised for 1 full year. He made a sound like something breaking. Madison? Mama, please, not Madison. Madison is 16 years old. She is the only person in this family who has treated me like a human being for the past decade. She does not need to watch her father be rebuilt from the ground up. She needs to finish being a child before she has to start being anything else. Mama, If, at the end of 2 years, the therapist I have chosen believes you have done real work, and if by that time you have repaid what you stole, and if I, Darius, not a committee, not a board, me, believe that you have become someone I recognize, then we will discuss a role for you in the Washington Family Trust. Not as a principal, as a steward, under supervision, earning your way back, 1 year at a time for as long as it takes. He was sobbing now, open, shaking sobs, the kind I had not heard from him since his father died. That is choice number 2. You have 30 seconds to decide. He did not need 30 seconds. 2. Mama, please. 2. Then you will sign the paperwork this afternoon. Mr. Brooks will walk you through it. I turned to Tasha. She was already crying. Tasha, baby, look at me. She lifted her face. I am going to pay the $400,000. She closed her eyes. A sound came out of her that was half relief and half shame. I am not paying it because you deserve it. I am paying it because that baby does. That child did not ask to be born into your husband's mess, and that child should not be raised by a frightened young woman being silenced by a check. I will pay the settlement directly to the young woman, through an attorney, structured as a trust for the child's education and living expenses. She will not have to see your husband's face again, and she will not have to spend that money proving she deserved it. Mama, thank you. I am not finished. She stopped. You will file for separation from Tyrone within 30 days. I am not telling you to divorce him. That is your decision. I am telling you that he needs to feel what it costs to betray his wife, and you need to feel what it is like to live without him for a while. And both of those things require separation. If, after 6 months, you decide to reconcile, I will support that decision. If after 6 months you decide to divorce, I will support that decision. But you will not spend another night in a house with a man who has disrespected you this profoundly while pretending everything is fine. That stops today. Yes, Mama. You will return to teaching, not at Madison's private school, in the public system. 3rd grade if you can get it. I know a principal at E.R. Carter Elementary who owes me a favor. You will earn a salary again. You will remember what it feels like to be a woman who provides for her children instead of a woman who is provided for. That is not punishment, Tasha. That is medicine. Yes, Mama. And the 2 of you, I looked between them, will attend family counseling together, with me, every other Saturday, for 1 year. You will sit in a room and tell each other, and tell me, the things you have not been willing to say out loud for a decade. It is going to be the hardest year of your lives. And at the end of it, we will see what we have left. Silence. I stood up. I walked around the table to where they were sitting. I placed one hand on Darius's shoulder. I placed my other hand on Tasha's head, the way I used to when they were small. I love you both. I have loved you both every minute of your lives, including the minutes when you were planning to take everything I had. I will never stop loving you. But love is not the same thing as trust, and trust is not the same thing as inheritance. Love is free. Trust is earned. Inheritance is chosen. I squeezed both of their shoulders once, and then I let go. Mr. Brooks will take it from here. I need to go see my granddaughter. I found Madison in the lobby. Andre had gone to pick her up from her school an hour earlier on my instructions. She was 16 years old, sitting on a bench in her school uniform, and when she saw me walk out of the executive elevator, she stood up very slowly, the way you stand up when you are not sure whether the ground is real. Grandma? Yes, baby. Grandma, what are you wearing? Why is everyone looking at you? Why did a driver come get me from school? I sat down on the bench beside her. I took her hand. Madison, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to just listen for a minute. Can you do that? Yes, Grandma. Your grandmother is not exactly who you thought she was. I'm still me. I'm still the woman who taught you to make biscuits, and I'm still the woman who braided your hair before your first day of kindergarten, and I'm still the woman who'll be at every one of your birthdays until the day I can't come anymore. But I'm also a woman who owns some things, some pretty big things. And today, some of those things became public, and they're going to be in the news. And your friends are going to ask questions, and your father is going to be going through something very hard for a while. She looked at me with those honey brown eyes that were her grandfather's eyes exactly. Is Daddy going to prison? I held her hand tighter. No, baby. No, he is not going to prison. He's going to have to change, and it's going to be hard on him and hard on your mother, but he is not going to prison. Okay? Madison, look at me. She looked at me. You have been the only person in this family who has looked at me like I was a real human being for the past 5 years. Do you know that? She started to cry. I didn't know anyone else wasn't, Grandma. I know you didn't, baby. That's what makes you who you are. I reached into my purse and took out a thin envelope. I handed it to her. This is not a check. Don't open it right now. This is a letter from me to you and a set of documents from Mr. Brooks. What it says, in simple words, is that starting today, your education is guaranteed. Every school you want to go to, every program you want to apply for, every opportunity you want to pursue, it is paid for, through college, through graduate school, through whatever else you decide to do with your life. You will not be handed anything you do not earn, but no door will close on you because of money, not ever again, not in this family. She opened her mouth. No sound came out. And one more thing, Madison. When you turn 18, if you want to, you may begin coming to this building on weekends and school breaks, and Mr. Brooks and I will teach you what we do. Not to give it to you, to show you what it is. And when you are old enough and wise enough and ready enough, if that day ever comes, we will talk about whether you want to carry some of it forward. That is not a promise. That is an invitation. You never have to accept it, but it will always be open. She threw her arms around me. 16 years old, in her school uniform, in the lobby of a building her grandmother owned, sobbing into my charcoal suit. Grandma, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you too, baby. Grandma loves you too. I am sitting on the front porch of the house on 2nd Avenue, the house my children still call the old place, the house I have owned outright since 1991, the house where Robert kissed me every morning of our marriage before he left for work. It is a Saturday afternoon in April. The magnolia tree Robert planted in 1986 is in full bloom. Miss Clara is inside making a pitcher of sweet tea. Madison, 17 years old now, is sitting in the rocking chair beside mine, reading a book on commercial real estate fundamentals I gave her for her birthday. She is going to Spelman in the fall. Tasha comes by every Saturday. She divorced Tyrone in September. She is teaching 5th grade at E.R. Carter Elementary. She is tired in the way a working mother is tired, which is a different kind of tired than the kind I saw in her kitchen that Sunday last year. A better kind. Darius is not here. He has been in therapy for 50 weeks. He has repaid $1,800,000 of what he stole. He sold the Buckhead house in August, the Mercedes in October, the watches in November. He lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur. He works as a financial analyst at a small firm run by a friend of Reggie's. He makes $85,000 a year. Last week he sent me a letter, handwritten, 4 pages. I have not read it yet. It is sitting on the table by my bed. I will read it when I am ready. Brittany divorced him in July. She remarried in February, a man named Preston who works in private equity. I have not seen Darius since that morning in the conference room. His therapist tells me, through releases he has signed, that he is doing the work, that he talks about his father a lot, that he has begun to understand what he did and why he did it, that he knows he may not see me again for a long time, and he has accepted that. We will see. Madison looks up from her book. Grandma, can I ask you something? Anything, baby. Are you going to forgive Daddy? I look out at the magnolia tree, at the blossoms the size of dinner plates, at the garden Robert and I planted the first year we were married, which I have kept alive by myself for the past 28 years. Baby, forgiveness isn't a door you open once. It's a door you learn how to build. Your daddy's still learning how to hold a hammer. I'm just waiting to see if he ever picks one up. She thinks about that for a long moment. Then she nods and goes back to her book. Miss Clara comes out with the sweet tea. She hands me a glass. Yvonne, Clara, you happy, baby? I look at my granddaughter. I look at the magnolia tree. I look at the house Robert and I chose together in 1983, and at the street where I have known my neighbors for 40 years, and at the sky over East Atlanta that is turning the particular shade of pink it always turns in April. Clara, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. They spent years looking past me, Clara. I know they did, baby. I used that time well. She clinks her glass against mine. Yes, you did, Yvonne. Yes, you did.